Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this Thursday afternoon. We are so glad that you're here. A quick reminder about updating your names on, if you could, so that we can note what district or charter school you're from, particularly when we share any information from the chat box with all of you. So just happy to be here on this lovely Thursday. We got some precipitation up north, so definitely enjoying the cold, wet weather in Santa Fe. So a quick overview for us. We will start by doing our traditional welcome and vision, and we will then talk about the readiness assessment specifically, and a little bit about one of the NM- supplemental modules available to support you in this work. And then we will just go ahead and step back into reminders and next steps. Just really quickly wanted to share with you all some items related to Zoom webinar for this current school year as we work together on the Equity Council Support Hub. So a couple of things that are available is that it allows us to share the statewide Equity Council meetings with a larger audience. So that means that you're welcome to invite any other district or charter school colleagues or your Equity Council members into this space. So we want to make sure that a larger audience can be accommodated during this current school year, not just our Equity Council leads. The Zoom webinar also allows us to broadcast a meeting to view-only participants. And also the hosts and the panelists can share their screens, videos, and audio in the webinar. And attendees, all of you can use the chat or the Q&A options to interact with those of us who are hosts or panelists. And just a quick reminder that you don't have a microphone or you don't have camera controls. Awesome, just some quick housekeeping and to get us going, and just turning it over to Everett Hill to take us into our centering activity and help us switch and step into this space.
Thank you, Maida. Welcome, everyone. We just liked at the beginning and end of each of our meetings to give you all an opportunity to transition from the space you were just in and to begin to transition into this space and settle just a little bit. So what I ask you to do is just sit yourself firmly in your seat, both feet firmly on the ground, and just take a moment to settle. Hands in your lap or on your knees or on the armrest in your chair. Take a moment to take a deep breath. Exhale. If it feels good for you to shake out your arms and hands, take a moment to shake those out. I'm going to ask you to sit straight up in your seat, firmly in your seat, taking a deep breath. And as you exhale, drop your shoulders. Taking another deep breath. Another large exhale, dropping your shoulders. One last time, pull in a deep breath. And exhale and drop your shoulders. Loosen your arms once again. Take a moment to think about what you want to accomplish here. And bring yourself presently into this moment. All right, hopefully that just helped you to transition from your last space into this space. And we'll look forward to a wonderful interaction with you all this afternoon. So I'm going to turn it back over to Maida.
Thanks, Everett. I'm going to go ahead and jump into meeting objectives to further anchor us in the space. So we will spend some time together so that participants can receive an overview of the Equity Council Support Hub for the current school year. We also want to make sure that participants will learn a bit more about the Readiness Assessment, which is an equity in action tool, and also consider how to leverage the results. And participants will receive a brief overview of the NM-Supplemental module on student groups. We will also just lead you all in a brainstorming session on a list of things that you could do with your equity councils as you move forward. Quick reminder of our norms: to stay engaged, to speak your truth, to experience discomfort, to expect and accept non-closure, to isolate race and intersect isms. And of course, we always encourage you all to consider any proposed norms as we are in the space of the Equity Council Support Hub that you feel are important for all of us to consider and be responsive to each other. So we'll go ahead and switch into an overview of the EC Support Hub.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to be here with you all. My name is Alan Brower, and I'm one of the Equity Council facilitators. And I'm just going to share a little bit about the resources that we have from the Equity Council Support Hub and go into a little bit of detail on each of the different components. And so here you can see a pretty wonderful framework of the entire support hub, going from the Equity Council support team, the service providers, and the equity facilitators that all are here to support your work as an Equity Council lead, as well as the community in which you're serving as well. And so this is a little bit different than last year if you were part of the Equity Council leadership for your district or charter school. And so we're really excited to have additional supports and resources for you all as you continue to do really important work around equity within your community. And so you as an equity lead, you are a critical aspect of the work that we're doing statewide and especially within your local community. And so your role is to participate in meetings like this, take the learning and information that you are receiving back to your district or charter school leadership and your local equity council to start to or continue to build upon the work that you've been doing within the equity and action items that we'll continue to talk about today. And so this is a quick snapshot of the equity facilitators. You see that we have about 12 wonderful people here who are working with each of you all within a smaller cohort to provide additional supports and a little bit more tailored supports. And so these folks, including myself as equity facilitators, provide ongoing thought partnership through check-ins and ongoing meetings to provide you with expertise and opportunities for building and learning across the work that you're doing and statewide as well. We will also have monthly meetings and group meetings and individual check-ins as needed with you all. And we'll also support your work in being part of these meetings as well, and so that you can get the most out of our time together. We'll also be able to provide just updates to our support team to ensure that if there is something that we really need to lift up as awesome progress and great ideas from the field, as well as challenges and innovations that are happening. We'll be able to shepherd those into the equity work we're doing statewide, so that all of us can learn from one another, and we can also support with any potential challenges that rise up that will be tailored to your needs. And then finally, the Equity Council service providers. This is something that's newer this year for our work at the Equity Council Hub. And the providers will be able to provide thought partnership and content expertise across the state. And then they will also be able to work with districts and charter schools, including you as a council lead, as well as your council members and staff, to provide support where needed, so that you can continue to make the wonderful work around equity really centered in your local community context.
Oh, Yate, I'm Kara Bodrath, Yunashe, Ashina, Shlina, Tani Chain. It's good to be here with you all and connect today around this important work. And I just want to build off of what Everett shared earlier about what is it that we're hoping to accomplish through our Equity Council work and culturally responsive education frameworks, as well as the work that we're doing with a 4-part strategy. And one thing that comes to mind for me is building opportunities for students so that they're holistically supported in all aspects of who they are, and that they're academically successful to pursue a college and or career, whichever it is that they want to pursue as they transition from high school on into the young adulthood. Second is that they're secure in their identity and have a connection to their culture and their community and who they identify as their community, and that they're holistically well. So those things that I hope that this work leads to for students in my community, and also with the schools and educators I have opportunity to work with. One inequity that I've been focusing on recently that has stood out is that only 20% of high schools on reservations across the nation offer computer science or computational thinking for Native American students, compared to 70 to 80% of high schools nationally. So that's just something that comes to mind when we think about opportunity. It's like a single kind of indicator that to me is really important in thinking about how do we build a pathway for students who want to pursue something like that within our schools. In New Mexico, I believe 44% of our high schools offer something to students like that. So that's just a small thing that's on my mind. Another is related to food and food systems, but we can get into, I don't want to get too much into that, but thinking holistically about what students have and have access to. And then also those other supports that we know that are very much needed in this period in time. So I'm going to switch into our goals, and just wanted to share out to you all what Everett's question kind of came up for me. One, establishing relationships with one another. If you haven't had an opportunity to connect with your Equity Council facilitator, please do that and take some time and really try to use that time with those individuals to not only support you, but to share ideas and also help us build a bigger community of learning. 2, differentiated support for Equity Council leads throughout the Equity Council Support Hub, which Alan just shared a little bit about what that looks like. Considering equity and systems, again, we kind of look back at model policies, whether that's at the board level, the school level, processes and programming, thinking about DEI work within your own organization and building strong, I guess, systems that support the people in the system and doing this work. And how important that is that you all are at the center of working with both the public education department, your community, your given role, whatever that might be within your community, and also with your leadership team. And that's a lot to carry and hold. So you want to make sure that we're building sustainable ways to make sure that this doesn't necessarily just have to be one person or one group of people, but it can actually be something that's carried out through the practices and things that we do. And then leveraging the equity and action items. Those are those various aspects of the different tools and things that we have put together, and we're all in different spaces on those, and that is not linear process, but one that just is guided by your work and with your community. And the focus on interdependency, realizing that we are all connected, that we have relationships within our communities, within our schools, that rely upon each other to make positive change in a way that makes sense for our students, and that our decisions and our voice and our actions all link together with one another. Okay, go on to the next slide. And revisiting our essential questions, and not sure how many of you have like pulled out a question or 4 of these questions to work with your communities, but basically, how is your district or charter school prioritizing the students and families furthest from opportunity and the establishment of equity councils? As we know, in Martinez and Yazzie, it held up 4 student groups: our Native American students, economically disadvantaged, our English learners, as well as students with disabilities. But it doesn't necessarily need to be limited to those 4 student groups, but like, what does that look like for your community, and how are we actively working to think about this in this moment in time? How do we establish an equity council that is set up to succeed in advising the district or charter school on budget, services, and programs? As we heard from Secretary Steinhaus last time we met, that there is quite a bit of funding that'll be coming from this past session, and also through our CARES Act, that can be used to do this work that maybe in the past we haven't had the opportunity to do. And is that reimagining our student support systems to provide more support for students socially, emotionally, through counseling and access to prevention programs and school-based health? Is it potentially thinking about launching a new bilingual education program, or providing year-round tutoring to students virtually and on site? So just those, what are those ideas that we've always really wanted to do, and how do we use this opportunity and time to be able to do that? How do we establish an equity council that moves the district or charter school beyond compliance to commitment? And commitment's really this we realize that you can do something, you can check a box and it's done, but then it's really not lasting, right? It's just an action, or it's something that we went through for a moment, or something that we may have thought that we had to do. And really this is work about being the long term, and being something that we believe in our heart, that we believe within our community, and that we have our core values centered on, which I believe in New Mexico, when we think about all of the students that we serve, it's been exciting to see how equity council leads have been able to share that within different cohorts and with one another, as we've been doing this over the past year or 2. And then, how do I support the establishment of structures and systems to ensure effective relationship and partnership between all stakeholders on the Equity Council? So, some feedback from last year kind of circled around, how do we authentically and intentionally engage students in conversations regarding equity in our schools and within our systems? How are you being supported? Or what are, maybe you've ran into some barriers and obstacles in trying to not just necessarily have people come to meetings, but just getting all voices engaged. And what does that look like for you? And then some cases, how do we really cast the net really, really wide? We heard from Santa Fe Public Schools about how they had 75 different folks engaged in conversations related to the equity work within their district. And the great model of work that's been taking place through REC 9 as well, and building a collective of folks who are coming together across several districts and rural areas as well. So next slide. All right, our statewide meeting topics for February is we're going to dive into the readiness assessment and get a little more deep into kind of where we were when we started. And I know that several of you had the opportunity to take a look at the readiness assessment. You've submitted kind of where you were in 2020. And now it's 2022. So we want to kind of take stock of if we were to bring that back out and have some reflective conversations about the various aspects of the readiness assessment, where would we be now? And then what do we want to do to use this information to think forward about what it is we're trying to accomplish? And then the New Mexico Dash, the supplemental module, is part of the 4-part strategy, and really lifting up those student groups that are connected to some of the statutes and policies that are identified in Martinez-Yazzie. Next slide. Okay. And this is just another visual and kind of a revisiting the 4-part strategy around the readiness assessment, which we'll be covering today. the advisement package and how to take an idea, operationalize it, and share that with your leadership team, your superintendent, your community, and or your school board or governance council, and to for thinking about implementing something within your system. The strategic equity plan and educational plan and budgets, there's still conversation around what that's going to look like as far as the public education department. As you guys are going through the budgeting process now that we're post-session and thinking about your educational plan, I really want to encourage and be happy to be thought partners around how to have equity councils be part of that discussion. And there's some models that we have pointed to, like such as Las Cruces Public Schools, that started to do that, and other folks as well. So if you are actively engaged in that work, where the equity council is part of that process right now, please let us know, because we'd love to be able to share that with others who are headed in that direction. And then our CLR inventory and framework, which is really kind of the aspect where it was found that there was, I think, 7 different items related to how does multicultural education take place in our state. And again, this goes back to some of the findings in Martinez and Yazzie, where they outlaid, like, if we're building responsive systems to students and families through multicultural education, or what we think of as culturally responsive education, now, how does that, like, what are the implications for that when we hire our teachers and train our teachers? What are the implications for that when we build and design curriculum, when we think about assessment, when we think about operations and finance as well? And so kind of thinking about what are the areas of the CLR work that need to come alive and are continuing to grow in your district and or your charter school. So these are the equity and action items. Just had an opportunity to share those with you, and we'll keep going forward. Timeline is flexible, and just knowing that this is like not necessarily a linear process. We know that all of these things are taking place every single day in our classrooms, in our schools, and with educators across our state and within our communities, that we have various levels of implementation, as well as we're learning as we go, and we're also sharing. So just knowing that at any given time, we're advising our leaders and our decision makers, we're thinking about more responsive ways to serve our students and families in the moment to, what is taking place on any given day or any given time throughout the trajectory of a young person's experience from early learning all the way through high school on into college. We're assessing like where we are with our programs and implementation, and what types of professional development does that require in order to really support a student and serving a student with a disability or an English learner, and thinking about the right materials and aspects of things that we need in our schools to be able to do that well. And what kind of data do we need in order to make informed decisions and really think about what's the one thing that we can move as we move forward. And then also thinking about centering on equity and as a means of transformation. So again, that long-term commitment versus solely focusing on something related to compliance. So I believe that is the last slide that I'm talking about, unless there's one more. And we're going to move on to the readiness assessment. So thank you guys for leading this work, and also just let us know, or let me know. I'd be happy to be a thought partner if you ever would need that. And just want to say appreciate you as well. And I'm going to pass it on. Okay, ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Kara. We're going to go ahead and transition and just take a moment to reflect on where we are with the readiness assessment statewide. And Tracy is going to take us through that next.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, I think my camera is stuck. Good to see some familiar faces or names, I guess, faces. So at one point, maybe you've already done it, or you're working on it, or you're getting to it. but at one point you've had or are going to have interaction with your readiness assessment. And this was actually the first major deliverable that your equity councils will have or should have worked on already. And so it's one of the tools that your equity council will use to make informed recommendations and advisements. So we're going to spend just the next few minutes thinking about your own equity council's work around the readiness assessment. Next slide, please. And take a moment if you've already turned it in, like Kara mentioned a couple of years ago, if you're working on it right now, if you haven't looked at it in a really long time, think about your readiness assessment and share with the group what is going on with that in your local context. And so think back to that. Maybe you found major gaps between what school leadership said and the community said, or what various parts of student population were represented, gaps in that, bright spots. This was your foundational building block as you move through this framework of the equity councils. So if you can share with us in the chat, what is going on in your local context with your own EC around the readiness assessment? Are you looking back to make sure you're feeling the priorities identified in that? Have you been able to fill those gaps and now you're continuing to expand those strengths you all have worked on over the years? Thank you. We've got something going on in the chat. Somebody says, Nora says, I haven't even seen the readiness assessment. We took it, but did not send the results, I believe. Asking for a Google form available for a retake from Kimberly. So we'll figure out who your equity facilitator is, Kimberly, and see how we might be able to support you there. Stephanie says we're working on an advisement for the board. Our school hasn't taken it, according to Alyssa. Haven't seen the readiness assessment. All right, so we're seeing a little bit of a theme so far, what we've got going on in the chat. There's a few folks who haven't seen it or haven't looked back on it in quite a while. So good first step as we engage in this work is to check back on there, figure out what needs to be done there. Thank you, everybody, for sharing. We've got folks saying they'll be going through that phase in the next month or two. People need access to see what was submitted. Thank you, everybody, for sharing. Our team is looking at the chat, taking down notes about who needs what. And so we use this to help support you and get you all on the right track. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you, Tracy, for taking us through that. And you are all in the right place so that we can make sure that you get the information that you need. So let's go ahead and dig in. Thank you for sharing. That's really helpful so we can get an idea of where everyone is. We are going to go ahead and move into unpacking the readiness assessment a bit. So the Martinez and Yazzie readiness assessment, as previously shared, is a tool that is focused on the student groups that were specifically named in the case. And it was created using the components within the decision and order and the current NMPED compliance and technical assistance guidance documents. The purpose of the Martinez and Yazzie readiness assessment is really to support you in fostering conversations about the services and the programs that are needed to meet the needs of at-risk students. And in this context, at-risk students refers to the students groups that were highlighted in the case. Please do know that we recognize that these conversations can be challenging and have been challenging and can potentially bring to light areas where the district or charter school is not always meeting the needs of at-risk students or where there's room for improvement. And that's perfectly okay. We are trying to make sure that we have honest conversations, that we speak our truth, and that we consider how we can reconsider what we're doing to serve our students. So having said that, a quick note and reminder that the readiness assessment is not something that we use at the NMPED for data collection or accountability. It is something that is for you in your districts and charter schools to have conversations, again, about services and programs, and definitely to brainstorm ideas about how to think strategically to improve outcomes for students, particularly those that are named in the case. So let's talk a little bit about what the Ready and Readiness Assessment means. In this case, the Readiness Assessment and the Ready within it is really focused on 3 of the 4 student groups highlighted in the case. So students who are English learners, students with disabilities, and Native American students, and supporting you in having conversations on figuring out how to really consider how ready you are to serve these students who need it the most, as listed in the case. So let's transition a little bit and talk about what you all need to know about the readiness assessment and how to obtain it and work through it, and what is the content within it. So the readiness assessment is available on the readiness assessment subpage of the Martinez and Yazzie Consolidated Updates website. And so what you will see there is that there is a link for you to access the readiness assessment in SharePoint. And if you need support in accessing that readiness assessment, you can reach out to us at our IET equity email address. And also on that page, you can find the practice readiness assessment. It's a Word document that you can take and utilize in your context. Here are some sample statements from the readiness assessment, just to provide you a general overview. So the draft rating statements that are available include items like, our district charter school provides grade level appropriate instructional materials to all teachers that support our English language development course. Also items like, our district charter school uses the NMPED's tribal consultation guidance documents or the Navajo Nation's tribal consultation manual and documents as applicable. Or, for example, our district and charter school ensures that all teachers understand what procedural safeguards parents' rights are. And just to make sure that we remind everyone, we did take this content from the decision and order and turned it into statements for districts and charter schools. A quick review of the 5-point rating statements. So there is the use of always, which would mean that an integral part of the district or charter school's mission, vision, policies, procedures, professional development, family and community engagement, and classroom culture already includes this item or the items listed in the statement. It then moves into usually, and then it moves into about half the time. We have 2 additional rating statements, and that would be seldom, again, just thinking about speaking our truth, which is that it's rarely part of the district or charter mission, vision, policies, procedures, professional development, family and community engagement, and classroom culture. And then, of course, never. The best way to complete the readiness assessment is to first onboard your equity council, build relationships with them, work on making sure that everyone is ready to move forward. then take the readiness assessment, and then use the results to advise. And as some of you shared in the chat just a bit ago, when Tracy supported us through that conversation, you could take this again, of course, particularly if some of your equity council members or there are other transitions within your district or charter school. So we have some suggestions for equity councils before they take the readiness assessment. We encourage you to set the norms for how the equity council will operate. Things like defining equity for your region. What does that mean in your particular context? And onboarding. So again, building relationships through hosting conversations where everyone's voice in the council is heard. We don't recommend moving into the readiness assessment too quickly. Definitely thinking about compliance versus commitment. We really encourage you to lean into the commitment piece. Additional suggestions before you engage with the readiness assessment is to set the tone by ensuring that the Equity Council understands what the readiness assessment is for and what it isn't. And one additional item would be to pair an expert in serving English learners, Native American students, and students with disabilities with a member of the council who is in the beginning stages of learning. So there may be some learning for sure to talk about who these students are and how these, for example, students with disabilities and English learners step into that particular space. So a suggested process for this would be for Equity Council members, once we're onboarded, we've done everything else, is for Equity Council members to read through the tool completely, for Equity Council members to ask questions, and then again, calibrate the understanding of the rating statements in the tool. And then moving into the Equity Council members taking the readiness assessment. And then the Equity Council members could use the results, of course, to inform their advisements or recommendations to the district or the charter school leadership. Okay, we're going to go ahead and transition into some specific considerations.
Thank you, Maida. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ian Esquivel, and I'll be talking about the next few slides. So in addition to the readiness assessment being available on the link that was shared earlier in hard copy, if you're somebody who wants to download that document, have it in front of you, fill it out with pen and paper, you're welcome to do that. You will also be receiving an email in the near future with a link to the readiness assessment in Google Forms. It's a copy of that readiness assessment, so you can download it, make another copy, use it internally if you're somebody who prefers to do the assessment that way. It can also help you when you're maybe tallying up what some of the responses might look like. So I think PED is doing a really good job trying to give multiple ways of accessing a similar tool. So want to make you aware that the Google Form option is forthcoming. So there might be a question about what if my district can't answer a certain question, or what if we don't have a certain population enrolled? And these are really helpful questions. I think we have a draft response on the next slide. Encountering a question like this that folks might feel is non-applicable, you can request that they answer the question based on the current systems and processes, and then in the comment box, explain how the district or charter school might remedy. I also think a lot of these questions are helpful for you to have conversations with your equity council. How are you planning and preparing to serve different students, even if you feel like maybe there isn't a large group of those students yet? The readiness assessment, again, is a tool to activate those conversations and to be thinking about systems and processes that you can always look to revamp and refine and update. So here's another example, right? If a district or charter school reports that they don't have any English learner students enrolled, how the district support and serve an English learner that moved to the district and charter school. So this is that forward-facing conversation where if your student body population tends to be homogeneous in one way or another, having conversations about, so what does it look like when we welcome a student who falls into one of these populations into our space? And how can we ensure that we're being inclusive and equitable for those students? So it might be a forward-facing or futuristic conversation, but still one very much worth having within your schools, districts, or charter. So here you'll see a process around ideas for taking the readiness assessment during the health order, recognizing that different communities are in different places with different levels of comfort. And so one idea about how to access these tools and calibrate and partner, you'll see reading from left to right. You can review the practice readiness assessment, again, in that Google form or in a Word document prior to populating that SharePoint. And you can talk about how you as an equity council want to engage with the tool. There's an invitation for individual equity council members to take the readiness assessment using that practice Google form. Again, I think there's probably a way for you to construct that. So if folks respond to the same Google form, while responses might be anonymous, on the back end, you can look and aggregate those responses. That can then help you in that next square as you begin to calibrate. Maybe the average score for one of the questions falls into this space or that space, and you and your equity council members can start to talk about that, especially if there are some outliers, right? Why did somebody feel like that's always happening or never happening? And again, the readiness assessment, rather than being a compliance tool, can be a tool around a commitment, can be a tool around generating ideas, learning from one another. And that also gets into this notion of pairing experts with beginners. I had a conversation prior to this meeting around an equity council member who felt really confident knowing about one student population and not very confident knowing about another student population. And there was fear and worry that if she filled out the readiness assessment inaccurately or not knowing as much in depth about one student population, that could really harm or hurt the results of the readiness assessment. So to alleviate some of that concern, again, the questions are more about how are we sharing understanding, how are we creating shared meaning, and sometimes pairing those experts and beginners can help in that process. And then one of the final steps is taking that readiness assessment in the PED SharePoint. And so while this is helpful to say, you know, our equity council has moved through the readiness assessment and uploaded something in SharePoint, it can also be helpful as you begin to formulate the advisements. And so that's something that's available to you with the tools. So here you see more about the advisements. It's important to note that the Equity Council will use what they learned from the tool to advise and inform. We've talked about that in the past, including, I believe what Kara mentioned, maybe looking at some ideas around budgets, policies. The advisement package, I think, does a really nice job offering specifics about how to move from really good ideas to making recommendations and requests through a process. And I am eager to turn it over, I believe, to Tracy, who will talk a little bit more about So Now What?
Yep, thank you for that, Ian. And so we are asking you, so now what? And the next slide, the question that we're going to focus on is totally applicable to wherever you are at in the Equity Council work. So if this is your first time here, you've just taken over the lead on this work, this is the first time you've heard of your readiness assessment, or you've done it, or you're in the middle of getting it done, thinking about the readiness assessment, what are some concrete goals that you can work toward? What does your Equity Council have and need in terms of readiness and resources to move it forward? Now, if you are done with the readiness assessment and you're doing the CLR inventory or framework, because everybody's at a different stage in this question still applies. What do you need in terms of readiness and resources to move your work forward? And when we think of readiness, there's different levels of awareness among the Equity Council, among school leadership, among the community, motivation, reminding folks, why are they in this? Why are they showing up every month or however often your council meet? What is the intention? What do you hope to get out of this? What impact do you hope to make? And in order to meet that motivation, meet that intention, what sort of resources do you need? Is it certain skill sets? Is it a different knowledge bank to pull from? Do you need more people to be in on this work? Do you need funding? Do you need specific training or professional development? So taking all of that into consideration, and given the stage that you are at in this work, what do you need in terms of readiness and then the resources to move it forward? And then take a look at this clipboard and spend some time answering that and try to come up with some very concrete, tangible action items that you can have a clear vision of how does it look when it's done, right? So the readiness assessment, it's not just about submitting this template and then turning it in. How do we know that this is done on my Equity Council? It's because 3 of our council members can tell us the gaps between the community and school leadership. It's because every one of our council members can speak to what we're working on making impact in. And so that's what it looks like when the task is completed. How will we know it's done? So think of really concrete descriptions that will tell you and your team when you finish something that was on your task list. So take a few minutes and think about what it is that you need to move your work forward. You have that concrete action item, right? When you can concretely describe what it looks like when it's done, how you'll know when you're done, go ahead and give us some ideas in the chat. Share one of those action items from your list with everybody in the chat. And as that chat starts to fill up, for those of you who are curious about what it might look like when it's done, the readiness assessment, what to look forward to, keep an eye on the chat and get some ideas from one another. So again, maybe we can go back one slide and just remind folks that we're asking you to think of a concrete action item. What does your Equity Council have or need in terms of readiness and resources to move it forward? What is that to-do list looking like for you all? When you have a couple of action items jotted down, please share 1 or 2 of those in the chat with us. Okay, we've got collecting input from parents and students on a variety of experiences, gradually using this input to hammer out goals for our school. With representation from each subgroup has proven difficult. Okay, how are you all engaging parents and getting them to show up? So feel free to throw any tips in the chat for folks who are looking for some solutions to some barriers they might be hitting. Need to find more people to serve on the council and representation from certain groups. So we've got a few folks experiencing the same situation right now. Come on now, don't be shy in that chat box. Share with us your task list here. I need to invite parents to participate and begin translating some documents into Spanish, since most of our parents at LADE are monolingual, then work on how to complete the readiness assessment. That is a beautiful concrete task to boost engagement. Make sure the material is in the language of the community you are serving. Equity at its finest. Thank you for sharing that. Data collection from the community, access, funding, commitment from members, maybe stipends for folks volunteering their time, visitation at each meeting from different parents instead of a 4-year commitment works better. Good. So rotating that membership, right? Good way to keep the community voice fresh there also. Yep, reinvigorating our council. Realistically, our goal is council building. We engaged the council that fell apart, and during COVID, a lot of folks are in that same situation. So it's good to see some similar things coming up from different districts and charters throughout the state. You're not alone in this work. Thank you, everybody, for sharing in the chat. As you continue to build out your task list, feel free to throw it in there, and we'll keep an eye on the chat and continue to pull from your good ideas. Thank you.
All right, I think we're ready to move ahead now to the next slide. And hi, everyone. Good afternoon. It's so great to see a lot of familiar names in the participant list. So I'm imagining your faces. Hope everyone's doing well and staying grounded, even as every day seems to throw a new surprise at us. I'm really excited this afternoon to talk to you about the NM- modules that deeply connect to our work with equity councils that are brought to you by the Language and Culture Division. They are focused on 2 main topics, and the first one is student groups. So you can see information from the description, the objectives, and also the success criteria. How are you going to know that the core teams at your district or school have accomplished the growth and the reflection and have really woven the focus on equity and the students furthest from opportunity into the DASH planning process over the course of the year, certainly before the beginning of the year, but then throughout. So I'm not going to read this to you, but just want to highlight that this module is focused on the student groups that are outlined in the statutes and the policies in Martinez-Yazzie. They are deeply connected to the readiness assessment that you're doing. And the goal here is to explore how to and what is possible when you center those students and really think about how do you design plans, redesign systems and structures in order to advance this work, in order to look at things with a new lens and hopefully discover new solutions to these entrenched inequities we've been discussing each month and in our small groups and one-on-one conversations. So we really highly encourage you and others to take the time to watch this. I know that in terms of the core team and data, those are 2 of the pillars of the NM- process. And so ensuring that the representation of all students is accomplished on the team is key, because you have every voice in the conversation. And then looking at a broad set and various types of data, both quantitative and qualitative, that can inform those conversations. I'll say also the second module, and we'll look at how to find it in a second, but the second module is designed to guide leaders through the basics of New Mexico funding, which is different than a lot of other states and also a little complicated. And it also speaks to strategic resource allocation. And we know, as many of my colleagues have talked about this afternoon, and we've seen sparks and insights in the chat from all of you, it really does take a mindset of abundance and of focusing on interdependence, and also seeking to create meaningful collaboration rather than surface level conversations. So you can access the creativity, the wisdom that's in the room, and that we all know without knowing, and effectively can braid funding and resources to support our students who most deserve to be lifted up by our educators and our leaders. So we can go ahead and look at where you can find this. So I personally feel like the easiest way is to go to the NM Dash library, and there's a link that I know Myra shared with all of the equity facilitators, so I'm sure it will or can be shared with you as well or again. But by going to that, you get a quick little overview of Dash, and you can access the learning modules, and it's very easy to enroll. You just enter your information, and very straightforward. And so I wanted to just emphasize something that we've heard from a number of people today, is that it's very powerful to return to things we've done before, to allow things to come full circle and then to move through into another circle, because it may be prior knowledge, prior conversations, but we can embrace new understandings and reflections, because I know we've all been through a lot the last 2 years, and we're speaking for myself, and I think most people would agree we're not the same for that. And so it reminds me of the old adage, you can never cross the same river twice, because you're not the same and the river's not the same. And so this river of NM Dash, this is a little commercial. These modules are here, they're good, and they're freely available. It's something that we definitely encourage you to explore. Equity Council members can register and get access, core team members who may be new, those of you who have called out that, hey, this is my first time in the role. What a great way to understand what is statutorily required of districts and some charters across the state, but districts and public schools, traditional public schools, I should say, and it's self-paced. So, I mean, what more could you want? How great. There is a walkthrough that takes you through it, and you can register very easily. So the next slide has a screenshot of the NM Dash dashboard, and this is another place that you can access the learning modules. And so if you have an account, which not necessarily every member of your equity council may right now, that's another quick way, but that's also something you should definitely consider for all equity council members, or make a priority, so that they can access at a systemic level, whatever that means for your LEA, the plans that have been created and how progress is being monitored and reflected on over the year. So yeah. The final slide just gives you a screenshot of what this looks like. You'll see some familiar language that we saw on the previous slide blown up more in terms of the objective and success criteria. But I'll mention that the materials really illustrate that this is interactive. It's not just clicking through a slideshow. It's something that prompts you to think about data and look at case studies, and that looking at novel scenarios and settings like that can sometimes bring forth powerful learnings that you can apply to your own school. And I know just from the folks that I have worked with that are participants today, and some who may not have been able to make it, that there's a wealth of knowledge on the NM Dash process too. And so I think between the wisdom that folks have around the equity councils that have maybe are further into implementation, plus that knowledge, there's possibility for a lot of powerful conversations in your smaller groups. So I hope this was a helpful overview. We definitely encourage you to interact and embrace these new insights, and help allow you to reinvigorate the work with your equity councils through the spring and beyond. So I'll turn it back to our next person.
Thank you so much for taking us through that. So we're moving into just some reminders and next steps. Please keep in mind that we will look through the chat and any questions so that we can be responsive to you, and you will receive a response either from your equity facilitator, from me, or we will direct you to someone who can support you through the Yazzie Inquiry email address. And a quick reminder of the website, and that the resources are there, and everything that we reviewed today would be available there. That would include the slides for today and then the recording. Just a quick commercial that the Martinez and Yazzie Consolidated Lawsuit webpage was reorganized. so that it could be a little bit easier to access content. And so you will see pages for each equity and action item. You'll see webinars and trainings pages, and you'll also see the advisement process page and the support and accountability page. Okay, we're going to go ahead and just switch over and close, and we have Everett taking us through that.
Thanks again, Maida. And I want to thank you all again for all of the work that you all are doing, the leadership that you're showing at a local level. And just to highlight a couple reminders, I know you got a lot of information today, a lot of really good information that'll be useful for you. But it is a lot of information, and we want to make sure we'll continue to create these pathways for you all to get to those items and that information. And again, just to highlight, as many of our presenters have talked about today, that equity facilitators, the equity hub, that folks there's an infrastructure of support for you as you're doing your work in local spaces. We think it's really important that we remind you that we understand that this is transformative work, supportive of both communities and students who are furthest from opportunity. And we want to make sure you feel supported in that. And just to hold up that sensibility around interdependence, that as you do this work, know that you have peers in other places, in other districts, in other part of the state who are doing similar things and similar work. And that this really is a community of practitioners working very hard to support the idea of centering equity, but that we're all taking part in helping to lift that. So all that to say that hopefully you don't feel like you're doing this work alone, because we want to ensure that you all feel like you're connected to a community of people and organizations who really are trying to move beyond that compliance to commitment to equity for communities and schools and our young folks. So again, I really want to thank you all. And as we move out of this space, this time I'm going to invite you to stand where you are. And I'll just kind of do this so you can still see me, but stand and invite you just to shake out your body, because you've probably been sitting for a while. Just shake out your right leg a little bit. Then we'll transition and shake out the left leg a little bit. And then drop your shoulders and shake out your arms. And just rub your hands together and feel the warmth of your hands as you rub them. And finally, just place one hand on your heart and one hand on your stomach. Take a deep breath. And exhale that breath. And we thank you all again for your attentiveness and your commitment to this work. Thank you very much. And with that, we'd like to say, have a wonderful rest of your week. And if there's anything that we can do in terms of helping to facilitate your work, please don't hesitate to contact your equity facilitator or any of us if we can be supportive. Thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of your week and hopefully a restful weekend.